What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video, and today we have another What Culture Star Wars video, and today their video is about 10 important Star Wars details that are almost never mentioned. So in this video, I'm kind of hoping they're going to bring up some details that I never really thought about and kind of like, blow my mind here and there, so hopefully they can do that. But if you guys want to see more videos like this, you have any ideas for future videos you want to see me watch or react to, give my opinion on, let me know in the comments below, because if I use your suggestion, I will give you a shout out in that video. But with that said, guys, let's jump in.
These are 10 Star Wars details that are almost never mentioned. 10. The impact of Owen and Beru's death on Luke. The final scene of Revenge of the Sith shows Obi-Wan Kenobi handing an infant Luke Skywalker to Owen and Beru Lars, who go on to raise the boy like he's their own. In A New Hope, Owen and Beru are murdered by Imperial soldiers, with Luke stumbling across the grisly sight of their charred corpses after returning from a chat with Obi-Wan. Though Luke is visibly shaken when he discovers what has happened to Owen and Beru, he immediately sets out on the path to becoming a Jedi Knight, and the impact that their deaths surely had on him is never mentioned again. Luke seems sadder about Obi-Wan's death, a guy who he barely knows, than he does about the deaths of a couple who, for all intents and purposes, were his real parents. With their deaths being so brutal, you'd imagine the image of their crispy bodies would gnaw at his insides constantly, especially considering he never got to say goodbye, or thank you, or anything. From a certain point of view, it's quite cold.
Okay, I guess I never really thought about that much. I always just kind of think about Luke being, obviously sad when Obi-Wan dies, but I guess it is true. You get a little bit of him being somber about it, but it doesn't really seem to mess him up as much as you might think it would, considering they were his adoptive parents. So yeah, I see an argument for that. That sounds good.
Number 9. How Palpatine built a Star Destroyer fleet without anybody noticing. How do I even... Let's do it anyway. Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker did such a bad job of explaining things that you had to go and play Fortnite if you wanted more context of the story.
That was
even
so
when the movie
dumb.
Did explain things, these
I can't believe they did
explanations
that.
were lazy, such as Poe's regularly memed line about how Palpatine has risen from the grave. Somehow, Palpatine has returned. Thank you, JJ. Clears things up. Something else the movie doesn't explain is how exactly Palpatine managed to build a massive fleet of souped-up Star Destroyers, a hugely important detail that the movie glosses over entirely. Where did he get the materials? How did he equip each ship with the planet-killing laser? How on Exegol did he finance this whole venture? With this fleet being the centerpiece of Palpatine's plan, it's unforgivable that the movie doesn't even try to explain it. And though extra backstory is available for those who want to do some homework, it's a total head-scratch for folks who only watch the films.
Yeah, that's what the sequel trilogy did. Disney said, why give you all the information in this one movie you're going to pay once for, where instead Disney can be like this. Hey, here's this, and this is this. Here you go. If you want to know why this is this, well, you don't get to know that. Nope, you got to end up paying $10 for this book. If you want to know a little bit more on the side, you got to buy this game. You want a little extra here and there, you got to play Fortnite. And even then, it still doesn't make any sense. So yeah, that's definitely one of the biggest problems with the sequel trilogy is the story isn't in the movies. Okay, let's continue.
Droids can possess human levels of sentience. Some of the most beloved characters in Star Wars are droids, with the likes of C-3PO, R2-D2, and BB-8 delivering many highlight moments in the movies they appear in. Despite this popularity though, something the movies never really discuss is that droids can possess incredibly high levels of sentience, and yet they're often treated as emotionless, disposable, or even just as jokes. Take C-3PO in Return of the Jedi, who seems terrified at the prospect of working for Jabba, and even expresses self-doubt, wondering aloud if he did something to warrant Luke leaving him behind.
What could possibly have come over Master Luke? Is it something I did?
Oh, 3PO, come here, give me a hug, if you can feel it. In that same movie, we even see a gonk droid screaming with pain while being tortured, which makes you think about all the other times droids have been damaged or mistreated and how they must have felt. Though the concept of droid rights was touched on in Solo: A Star Wars Story, it's an issue the movies have never done justice, despite the crucial role various droids have played in almost every single film. Droid rights now. 7.
Yeah, I thought that same thing too. I remember in one of my high school literature classes, we were talking about how Star Wars was different than a lot of other sci-fis, and what made it a space fantasy was the idea of the droids having personalities. They're not just like, hello, I am a robot, like every other sci-fi did at the time. Star Wars actually added a sentience to their droids. Their droids were like people walking around, and they had like nerve endings and stuff like that. Or at least not that they necessarily had nerve endings, but they had like programming to the point where some could actually recognize pain from touch, which is interesting because like that's not really a thing ever anywhere else. So it's interesting for sure.
Ewoks are highly skilled fighters. Mention the Ewoks to a casual Star Wars fan and they'll probably start talking about how adorable they are, which is fair enough. Just look at their fluffy little faces.
They are fluffy.
But look, something people never talk about, and something that, if their reputation as lovable plush toys is anything to go by, the movies haven't made clear, is that the Ewoks are among the most skilled fighters in the Star Wars galaxy. Just look at how they completely outclass the technologically superior Empire in Return of the Jedi. They coordinate their ambush outside the shield generator perfectly, starting off by using R2 and 3PO as a distraction, and following this up by forcing the Imperial troopers to split up and run into the woods, right where the Ewoks want them. And that's not to mention how bloodthirsty they are, with the little beasts fully intending to dine on Han until 3PO's magic convinces them otherwise. The Ewoks look fairly harmless, and the majority of their scenes are played in a light-hearted way, which greatly distracts from their brutality and combat efficiency. Teddy bears, they most certainly are not.
Yeah, they're effectively just like, you know, like Planet of the Apes, right? They're just gorillas. I mean, they're bears, but like they are like the Planet of the Apes gorillas. Like they will kill you. And another thing about Ewoks is like, yeah, 1 or 2 isn't a threat, but when you have like 30 little bear savages with pointy sticks coming at you, like you're not gonna live. You're dead, you know. So yeah, that's true. People overlook that.
The destruction of the Death Star brought the Empire's followers closer together. The destruction of the first Death Star at the end of A New Hope was a huge victory for the Rebel Alliance. But if you look at it from the Empire's point of view, then it was nothing short of an act of terrorism. The movies never touch on the fact Luke murdered millions of innocent people when he blew up the planet killing machine. All those janitors, technicians, what about the chefs, who were only working for the Empire because it was a job, or because they were too scared to leave? Further still, it's highly likely that this mass murder actually brought people from the Empire closer together, and possibly even galvanized the additional support for the Empire across the galaxy. Though this angle was somewhat explored in 2017's Star Wars Battlefront 2 game, the movies never take the time to ponder such interesting details, with the ramifications of the Rebels' victories never being looked at from the opposing point of view. It almost makes you want a Taken 2 style spin-off, where the father of a murdered Death Star employee hunts down Luke to enact his revenge. Go on, Disney. You know you want to. 5.
See, I think that's an interesting take. There were some people who obviously, you know, that was kind of, as much as it was a big blow to the Empire, it was also like a martyr to them. Like it kind of got them more rallying. But a lot of people really hated the Empire. Like a lot of people who were in the Empire hated the Empire, and the only reason they did it was because it was so powerful. What are you gonna do? Yeah, there were some who saw it as an act of terrorism, but there were some who saw it as an act of freedom. And actually, I would probably say the majority of people probably saw it as an act of freedom, especially if you look at the end of Return of the Jedi, when some of the biggest cities, from Coruscant, Naboo, you know, we just see a bunch of like people all across the galaxy just celebrating. And usually people in the right mind don't celebrate terrorism. So I think that's a good example to show people did not like the Empire. And like I said, Return of the Jedi at the end of that, it proves that. So yeah.
The Jedi are incredibly rare mythical beings. The Jedi are prominently featured throughout the entire Skywalker saga, from Obi-Wan and Anakin in the prequels to Luke in the
kitty cat
originals
hair
and
on
Rey
me.
in the sequels. This ends up giving off the impression that there's a Jedi on every street corner, making it easy to forget that in actual fact they are mythical beings, and that the vast majority of people in the galaxy have never actually seen one.
Luke Skywalker. I thought he was a myth.
Because we follow one of these lightsaber-wielding heroes for each of the 9 core movies, it does feel they're way more common than they actually are. Remember, the Jedi
Content
Order
creators
is
always
fairly
have one of these
reclusive
ready to
during the
go.
prequel era, and pretty much extinct for the next 6 movies. 4. The Dark...
Yeah, I guess it is interesting. The idea of like these mythical creatures being, they were just everywhere and now they're not anywhere. You know, I'm okay with that because of how massive the universe is, and how, you know, if you were raised in an empire that believed that Jedi were evil, you know, and you're supposed to report them, maybe you would just kind of start to see them as mythical beings because they no longer existed, you know? So that's okay.
Side of the Force isn't inherently evil. Force users are divided into two camps, the Jedi and the Sith, or the light and the dark. The movies draw a firm line between these two camps, telling us that the dark side is evil and that light, well, is right. Jedi want that on a t-shirt. While most on-screen evidence points to this being true, a notion that isn't fleshed out is that the dark side in isolation isn't necessarily evil. Rather, it's the users of the dark side who abuse its power for their own selfish or chaotic intentions. Look at someone like Count Dooku. Though he wields the dark side of the Force, he hasn't let emotions like anger and hatred corrupt him, like they have for so many other Sith. Instead, he uses his dark side abilities with control. He's clearly far more level-headed than the likes of Vader and the Emperor, proof that dark side users need not become mustache-twirling megalomaniacs. And then there's Dark Vectivus, who also practiced the dark side but never let it consume him and could stave off that destructive temptation. Despite what the movies might tell us, wielding the dark side doesn't automatically mean that a person is evil or that they will always succumb to the lure of power. It just depends on the person. 3.
I mean, that's honestly, like, if you want to go from the dark side of just like in real life, if you want to come from that perspective, you know, that's how everything is, you know, like I'd even maybe say the dark side could be considered greed, because there is good greed and there's also bad greed. So, you know, that's with a lot of things. There's good and there's bad in everything. But yeah, a dark side user could be a Jedi. An argument could be made that, you know, Qui-Gon, he was more considered a gray Jedi, obviously, even though they're not technically canon. Maybe they did make him canon now, but you know, his thought process wasn't just Jedi. You know, he had more Sith ideals that people don't really want to talk about, and not like evil Sith ideals. I'd say more like the dark side and the idea of what a Sith would be. So that's interesting. And I always thought like that's one of the things that made Luke so powerful than a lot of other Jedi. It wasn't necessarily his training, but was the fact that he was able to use his emotions to his advantage. And that was one of the strongest things about him. That's what made him so powerful in Legends, was that he was able to wield the dark side for good, and I think that's interesting. So, yeah.
How Maz Kanata acquired Luke's lightsaber. When Maz Kanata pulls Luke Skywalker's blue lightsaber from a box and hands it to Finn in The Force Awakens, Han Solo asks her where she got it. Her response? A good question for another time. In hindsight, her refusal to give an explanation feels startlingly similar to Poe's somehow Palpatine returned. Sorry, I can't even say anymore. And though this particular detail arguably isn't as important, it's nonetheless frustrating that the movies never reveal how Maz acquired a lightsaber that was presumed lost deep within Cloud City. Some fans have headcanonized that because Maz was a pirate queen, she acquired it via her connections to the smuggling world. After all, she's lived a long life, so had plenty of time to stumble across it. Other Star Wars media has discussed the lightsabers post-Luke Fate 2, revealing that a random Ugnaught found it on Cloud City and kept it from being destroyed. But as for how it made its way into Maz's hands, that's a good question for another time. 2.
We still don't know about that. Yeah, I'd like to know that full story. I think it was something like that, like the Ugnaught got the lightsaber and then someone stole it from the Ugnaught, or he sold it to someone who then got it stolen from, that eventually ended up in Maz's hands. It was someone like that. I don't know if that's canon or not, but I remember hearing there was actually a canon explanation now, but that's, I mean, I could be wrong.
Dismemberment makes Force users less powerful. Though the whole midichlorian thing has been largely swept under the rug in recent years, it's still part of Star Wars canon. Midichlorians which live inside the body's cells are linked to Force potential, so the higher the midichlorian count, the more Force potential an individual will have. So what would happen if that count was suddenly reduced? In a 2005 interview, George Lucas himself spoke about that idea, discussing how dismemberment would affect a Jedi or a Sith's Force abilities, stating Anakin actually became less powerful after Obi-Wan chopped him into bits. Lucas went on to explain that the Emperor viewed Luke as a primo version of Anakin, simply because his body was more intact, and this was why he offered the younger Skywalker the chance to join him. Despite this idea coming straight from the horse's mouth, not a single Star Wars film has ever delved into it, which is bizarre considering how the franchise's two main characters both suffer dismemberments at various points. 1.
Yeah. I always knew that. Like, that always made sense. Like, think about it. Vader can't use Force Lightning now because he has all these different augmentations, and he effectively has to rely more on the Force because he doesn't have the ability to use like his hands and stuff. Or he can use his hands for most things, but it's like that's what made him more powerful in the dark side, was that. But that was always something that was known, like Anakin's Force potential, what he could have become had he not been injured by Obi-Wan. He would have been unstoppable. That was kind of what they were going for. So when he was injured physically, he became less of a good duelist, but he had to rely more on that Force power to be able to keep up. And of course, you know, because of those robotic enhancements, while he wasn't as accurate, he was a lot more physically imposing and stronger in his fights. So you know, it's just one of those interesting things about him that I always knew, but I get it if people don't really get that. But yeah.
Severity of the Republic's Geonosis defeat. The arena battle in Attack of the Clones is a terrific spectacle, but the ramifications of its outcome are severely underplayed throughout the rest of the prequels. To recap, Jedi Master Mace Windu leads a strike team into the Geonosis arena to rescue Anakin, Obi-Wan and Padme, only to be met by an army of battle droids. An all-out brawl ensues and many Jedi are slaughtered, with the survivors being rescued by Yoda, who whisks them away with some rather handy gunships. Despite hundreds of Jedi entering the arena, there's only a handful of them left when Yoda shows up, meaning a vast majority of what was supposed to be the most formidable fighting force in the galaxy was killed within minutes. Even worse, Mace tells Yoda before the battle, "I'll take what Jedi we have left," implying the ones in the arena were all the Jedi that remained. Weirdly though, the rest of the prequels fail to convey how catastrophic it was that so many Jedi died in such a needless manner. I'm afraid to say there's not much we can do about this now, but let's just hope that Palpatine somehow doesn't return.
Huh. I guess that's true. Episode 2 had a really big moment with that. Like that is something big that really did kind of get glossed over. I always saw it as, you know, this is the Jedi's true first threat in a long time. And as you can see in Clone Wars, as time goes on, the Jedi and stuff, they get better. You know, they learn how to be better in war. Yes, they train for conflict fighting, battle, dueling, and stuff like that, but you're never really into a real fight until it's actually like life or death. And I think this was a big wake-up call for them, and that's why they're so much more better than they are in episode 2 when you see them like in episode 3. Even Obi-Wan, who was considered one of the better duelists at the time in episode 2, he's way better than he was by episode 3 because of the Clone Wars and because he got you know, molded by that time. So yeah, these are all pretty interesting. What do you guys think? Did you agree with these? Do you disagree with them? What are some ones you would add personally into this list if you had the ability to? Like, what other things in Star Wars do you think doesn't get enough attention? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider leaving a like, subscribe, turn notifications if you enjoyed this video. Like I said in the beginning of this video, if you have any cool ideas for future videos you want to see me react to or give my opinion on, let me know in the comments below, because if I use your suggestion, I will give you a shout out in that video. But thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you next one. Peace.